On number 12, the key here is to realize that we have 3x squared minus 3y squared. So we're not looking for the individual values of x and y. And we can see that we have a binomial. So if we take x plus y times x minus y, if we multiply that out, the middle terms would cancel. So that would give me x squared minus xy plus xy minus y squared. The middle terms would cancel. That would give me x squared minus y squared. That looks really similar to 3x squared minus 3y squared. We just have to multiply by 3. So x plus y, we already know that. That's 7. X minus y is 3. We already know that. So x squared minus y squared is 21. So to get 3x squared minus 3y squared, all we have to do is multiply this by 21. So that would be 21 times 3. So the answer here would be 63. On number 13, we have water from the ocean, which has 3.5% salt, but then water from the Dead Sea, which is much saltier and has 33.7% salt. And we have 10 gallons of ocean water, but we want to add water from the Dead Sea to be added so that the salt concentration increases to 10%. So the key here is to set up an equation. If we know the ocean water has 3.5% salt, that would be 0.035. And then we multiply it by 10 since there's 10 gallons. And the Dead Sea salt, or Dead Sea, has 33.7% salt, so that's 0.337. And we're adding X gallons of water. And what we know is we want it to be equal to 10% salt. So 10% would be 0.1, and I've already started with 10 gallons, and I'm adding, again, X. So the key here, again, is to set up the equation. From here, you just solve for X. 0.035 times 10 would be 0.35 plus 0.337X, and then we distribute here. That would give me 1 plus 0.1x. We then move all the x's to the same side, and then we move all the constants to the other side. So we would minus 0.35, and then we would also minus 0.1x. So the resulting equation would give me 0.237x equals 0.65. And then we divide both sides by 2.237. And then we get our answer. You can see over here it says measured to the nearest hundredth of a gallon. So clearly this is a section that would allow you to use your calculator. And so if you do that on your calculator, you would get x equals 2.74 rounded to the nearest hundredth. So that would be our answer for this problem. On number 14, we have a quadratic because we know we have x squared. So to solve this, we want to get the equation to be equal to 0. So I would subtract 4x from both sides, and I would write it so that the x squared term comes first. So you have a negative 3x squared minus 4x plus 2. From here, you need to know what the quadratic formula is. That's x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And so from here, we substitute. So the value of b is negative 4, so negative b would be positive 4. B squared would be negative 4 squared minus 4 times a, negative 3, times c, which is 2. All of this is over 2a, or 2 times negative 3. So now we just work this out. This gives me 4 plus or minus. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. And then we have negative 4 times negative 3, which is 12. 12 times 2, which is 24. Over negative 6. And then this becomes 4 plus or minus square root 16 plus 24 is 40 over negative 6. And then we have to simplify the radicals. So The biggest perfect square that goes into 40 would be 4. So this would be square root of 4 times the square root of 10 over negative 6. And so this would give me 4 plus or minus 2 radical 10 over negative 6. From here, we want to reduce the fraction. What's the biggest number that goes into 4, 2, and negative 6? That would be 2. But since we have a negative number in the denominator, we want to make it positive. So we divide everything here. We divide the top by negative 3, by negative 2, and we divide the bottom by negative 2 as well. So the final answer I would have is I would have negative 2 minus plus square root of 10 over positive 3. And so it says which one is a solution. We just look for one of the solutions. So the answer here would be D on number 14, because I have negative 2 minus square root of 10 over 3, and that looks like the answer that I have over here. On number 15, we are given a function, g of x, and we have a table, and it says which would be a factor of g of x. So what we're interested in is we want to know where the function, what values of x is going to make the function 0, because that means that if it's a factor, 0 times anything would be 0. So we can see if x is negative 2, a factor would be x plus 2. If x is 1 here, a factor would be x minus 1. So we can see that the answer would be A, because we have the factors x minus 1 and x plus 2. In problem number 16, we're being asked to draw some conclusions. There were 100 students surveyed. 40% said they wanted a new library. So it's important to realize that out of the 100 students surveyed, that doesn't represent all of the students at the university. There are more. This is just 100 students being randomly surveyed. So if you look at answer choice D, it says no more than 40 university students want a new library. That can't be true, because we know that there are more than 100 students in the university. On part C, it says exactly 40 students at the university want a new library. That would be true if there were only 100 students at the university, but that's not true. 100 students is only part. On number B, it says 40% of all people in the university community want a new library. We don't know that's true either. They could interview 100 students in another survey, and maybe 30 of them said yes, maybe 50 of them said yes. So we don't have a guarantee, but we know the answer choice is A, because we know that they surveyed 100 students. 40% said they wanted a new library. So 40% of 100 is 40. So that's why the answer for this problem is A. In number 17, you'll need to remember that the formula for a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared, where h comma k is the center of the circle and r is the radius. So because this equals 9, we immediately know that the radius for this circle is 3. And if you envision the graph, we want all the x and y coordinates of the circle to be greater than 0, which means that we want the circle to be somewhere here in this quadrant. So that means that the answer would be D. A has to be greater than 3 and B has to be bigger than 3. And the reason we want that to happen is because we need the center of the circle to be somewhere here, because if the circle's radius is 3, then all the x and y coordinates would be greater than 0. But you can see all the other answer choices, you could have a value less than 3 in either A or B, meaning that it's possible that the radius would make the circle go into the second, third, or fourth quadrants. In number 18, we're given an equation that represents the escape velocity. And what we want to do is we want to find the value of m in terms of all the other variables. So if we take our equation and we try to isolate m, the first thing that we would do is square everything. the result of doing that is that removes the square root. So that would give me VE squared equals 2GM over R. And then I would multiply both sides by R. That clears the denominator. So that would give me VE squared R equals 2GM. And then to solve for M, I would divide both sides by 2G. So that gives me VE squared R over 2G equals M. And you can see that would be answer choice number 3. In problem number 19, we know that a sphere has a volume of 8 cubic feet, and we want to know the volume of a new sphere which has twice the radius of the original one. So remember, the volume of a sphere is 4/3 pi r to the third power, and the volume is 8 cubic feet. So 8 would be equal to 4/3 pi r to the third. If we double the radius, that means r would then be 2r. So the volume would be 4/3 pi, but instead of writing r to the third, it would be 2r to the third power, which then would give me 4/3 pi times 8r to the third. If we adjust things around a little bit, this would give me 4/3 pi r to the third times 8, but we already know that 4/3 pi r to the third is 8. So we just replace it here. So the new volume would simply be 8 times 8, which would be 64. So the answer for this problem would be 64 cubic feet. In problem number 20, we know we have a cubic function because there are 3 roots. One root is at x equals -2. One root is at x equals 1, and another root is at x equals 4. Immediately, we can eliminate answer choices C and D because we can see that if you multiplied that out, there would only be 2 factors. It would be a quadratic. Because one of the roots is 4, that means one of the factors here is x minus 4. Because this root is 1, we know another factor would be x minus 1. And because this root is -2, we know that another factor would be x plus 2. So the only answer that has all of those would be answer choice B. That would be the answer to this problem. In problem number 21, we know that this square ABCD has an area of 36 square units. So that means that each side would be 6 units long because 6 times 6 is 36. We also know that the vertex of the square, WXYZ, the one inside, bisects the square of ABCD. That means that each side here is 3 because it cuts it in half. And what we want to do is we want to find the perimeter of square WXYZ. So to do that, we just have to figure out the length of one of these sides and multiply it by 4 since it's a square. To do that, we do the Pythagorean theorem. 3 squared plus 3 squared equals x squared. That gives me 9 plus 9 equals 18. So 18 equals x squared. Take the square root of both sides to get x and then simplify the radical. So the biggest perfect square that goes into 18 would be 9. So this would be square root of 9 times square root of 2, which gives me 3 square root of 2. And then in order to find the perimeter, we just multiply it by 4. So that would be 4 times 3 square root of 2, which would give me 12 square root of 2. So that's why for this problem, the answer would be D. In problem number 22, we have a projectile that is being thrown that follows this equation. We know that this equation is going to be a parabola because of the t squared, and we know that the parabola is going to open down because of the negative coefficient. So roughly, the trajectory would happen like that. And we know that the maximum height, because that's what we're looking for, maximum value, that's going to happen at the vertex. And so the formula for the vertex of a parabola is x equals negative b over 2a. But in this case, it would be t equals negative b over 2a, since the formula is in terms of t instead of x. So then we substitute. The value of b is 16, so negative b would be negative 16. And then 2 times a would be 2 times negative 16. This would give me negative 16 over negative 32, which reduces to positive 1/2. So the answer that it reaches the maximum value would be 1/2 second.